to the Woodwork podcast. I'm Josh Taylor from Josh Taylor Woodworking. With me we have Paul
Hello.
from JCR Joinery as usual, and today we have a special guest, Jerry from Grantland Timber. Welcome, Jerry.
Good morning, Grantland.
Good morning.
Timber. Please, Jerry, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what is it you do, and just generally about yourself and your company, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, guys. My name is Jerry. I run a small little company in the heart of mid-Devon called Grantland Timber. We do a mixture between forestry and agriculture. So we manage our own woodlands and we selectively fell trees for prosperity, mainly for the prosperity of the woodlands. And in addition to that, we have a couple of sawmills and we mill our own timber for carpenters, joiners, timber framers, DIYs, resin tables. Yeah, we try and do a little bit of a mix of everything. Bread and butter stuff, of course, like firewood. Yes, we do that also. And our services are tree surgery and forestry work. And accompanied with that, we do a healthy amount of cow cuddling because we've got a bit of grassland on the farm. So we spend a lot of our time prattling around with the cows also.
So, is there any kickback from the locals with cutting down the trees?
Well, the woodlands are our own, so
Well, they can't argue with that.
no. I mean, but we try and make sure that when we're felling the trees, it's not from a monoculture system. They haven't been planted for the purpose of them to be felled for immediate return. We selectively pick the inferior quality trees, and then that would then change the environment around the trees in the area, and that then encourages the others to grow. So by selectively felling, it means we can eliminate the stuff that may not be good, and then replant in its place.
I think.
Cool. How does that? How do you selectively fell one? What's the criteria?
Look for defects. Maybe there are trees that you can see that have obvious signs of decay, and sometimes you can. There's something called a wolf tree. Wolf trees are best way to describe it are trees that look very prosperous, but however they are taking so much of the nutrients and light and space around them that they're actually smothering other trees in the area, which will of course grow into a better quality tree. Also, looking at how they grow is a good indicator to the quality of the timber. So if the lateral branches are fairly uniform, that means there's a steady growth in it. If there's obviously sporadic kind of growths, it's not something that I would personally keep. I quite like stuff that it's grown at a steady pace rather than rushed. But that again differs between species to species. So some softwood varieties, conifers, they actually are better quality timber when they are slow grown, and contrary to that, hardwoods, they are better when they are fast grown. That's all down to.
I mean, you can see
structure.
a lot of that with obviously the rings and the timbers
Wow.
you buy, and it's one of those things you do see on social media about the quality of the wood from say the early 1900s to now. When you look at the rings where they used to be nice and slow grown, and you wouldn't have as many rings in softwood. I'm talking like your pine, your pine and your redwoods and that sort of thing. Whereas now there's a billion rings because they're forced grown, aren't they, to obviously meet the demand and the needs of the people. But that's quite interesting what you said about the selective felling, because I think it seems to be called that on Clarkson's farm in Series 1, where you're like, what? Everyone was shouting about it. Why are you taking all these trees down? But when he actually took down like a row of trees from there and a row of trees from there, and I see it an awful lot as well in the when I used to go mountain biking in those sort of areas in like Llandegla and what have you in Wales, and it actually opens the amount of light it opens up. It encourages not only the trees to grow, but it encourages the wildlife in the area to prosper more, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because obviously it gives them more. It gives the forest or the woodland floor a lot more light, which gives more nutrients, which helps the other stuff, which then helps the local animals, and everything has its own ecological place within the woodland system, doesn't it? Effectively.
Absolutely. I mean, Josh, one of the probably easiest way to describe it to you, you're an Aussie, and you have typically the way that things grow in Australia is it burns. It's a burning country.
Yeah.
And you'll naturally, or it used to be an old practice between the Aborigines, but they would burn swathes of land, and the purpose of that, of course, is to get the bed better suited for the species of trees that they had, and that in turn would encourage new growth. And the same way in the UK, perhaps look at it more as like gorse bushes.
Or the bosses on the moors. Because sometimes they clear off the moors, don't they, for agriculture?
They'll absolutely murder and eradicate gorse bushes, and then they'll just burn the hell out of it. And that is it's really a tricky one, because of course as kind of you would think that the elimination of stuff is not beneficial. And yes, of course, we're living at a current present moment in time when we are destroying a lot of our natural habitat. If we look at the Amazon rainforest, of course, we're eradicating so much of it. But in turn, when I obviously don't agree with the eradication of the Amazon rainforest, of course, but if we're looking at managed woodland systems, they actually require human intervention for it to grow and develop at a managed pace. Because the reality of it is that as the environment changes, you will effectively create a better habitat for maybe something that you didn't want there. So if you're growing a hardwood plantation and you suddenly chop down quite a few, the first things that would pop through are light dominant trees, and you don't necessarily want that in your I don't know, hardwood plantation of oaks.
There's quite a lot of science behind it, really, isn't there?
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole forestry game was I am an amoeba to it. If I'm going to be point blank honest, I am still a baby. I'm still crawling, and I am still learning. There's still so much that I have yet to learn, and I still try and make sure I behave a bit like a sponge. I've got one guy called my business partner, really, but he's not just my business partner. He's my best friend and my mentor. He has a wealth of knowledge, and he's got funny things after his name because he went to uni and studied forestry. But along with that, our neighbour used to be his university lecturer at Bangor Uni. So I'm sat between a quite an interesting spot, because I can obviously go to Nick, and if I don't like his opinion on it, I can go and ask Bill Blight. But yeah, so it's nice.
Well, no, he said that, so I don't think that's right.
Yeah, but stuff changes, doesn't it? Like, it progresses. Yeah. So, and occasionally I just won't listen.
Yeah, it is. I mean, one thing I used to find it's a totally different sort of thing, but it's the same principle with all the husky racing I used to do and all that sort of thing. That I'd have probably one issue one of the dogs, or I want to change the way you're doing something or whatever. And this could apply to anything though. And I'd ask 3 or 4 different people, and I'd take little bits of information each person and make the answer that I sort of need out of that so it works for me. Because obviously, it's not always going to be the same 10 years, 20 years down the line if the land's changed, I suppose, or something like that. And so, what sort of woods are you actually sort of growing and felling do you have a specific sort of, do you go for like, oh, I mainly like doing oaks or whatever, or do you just do whatever you've got to happen?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm a bit flexible because not because I'm lazy, but I encourage more natural regrowth. So I will stake and tube something that I've noticed that's regrowing, or a natural, self-seeding.
Yeah, something that's just happened in nature rather than someone's planted.
But typically what we have is UK any indigenous UK deciduous species, so ash, oak, beech, things like that. Softwood varieties, we've got lots of larch, lots of Douglas fir. Yeah, I like those. They're quite nice. And at the moment, we've got a bit of an issue with ash dieback. I don't know if you might not have heard of ash dieback, Josh, because it's not so
never
prominent in Australia. But it's a disease which is affecting ash trees across Europe, and that has moved over into the UK. We've got a serious problem with it. I mean, the way that I would best describe it would be my generation's version of Dutch elm disease.
I didn't know about it, to be honest, and obviously I'm UK as well, but I've not heard about it. But I don't use a lot of ash, to be honest.
Yeah, ash is a beautiful timber, which actually it's amazing, but it has certain properties which are particularly important that will be lost if we aren't making a conscious effort to do something about it. The downside is, I think it's past its kind of tipping point. So
what can you do about it?
Well, after I've been speaking to a couple of people who are at Exeter Uni, and they're kind of research based. Also, people within my industry. Apparently, there's meant to be a hybrid species that they have developed, and this hybrid species, because of it being in its embryonic stage, they haven't got any evidence of it yet having the same characteristics as the ash that we are familiar with. So it's only only time can tell. We don't know. We'll see. But the downside is that ash is a beautiful tree. There's an amazing quality about it, because if you are someone who is new to your woodlands, ash will be able to provide you a very quick income comparative to any other species. So it grows fast. It's highly calorific, therefore it makes good firewood, and that means you can get a healthy return, and it regenerates very fast. So typically what ash do is they lay kind of semi-dormant on the woodland floor, and then a catastrophic event will happen, like a big tree will fall over in the area, and that's when they'll accelerate, and then they'll shoot up like mad. So within that space of time, you've got something that you can either remove and put into charcoal as an example, because it will probably be at a stage where it's big enough to be turned into charcoal.
Do you have Sorry, do you have people that come to your estate? Because a couple of weeks ago on the podcast we had John JB Turner's up. So he does, what was it called? The green wood turning guy. Yeah, the green wood turning, and he has all the big frame. And John I think he was from somewhere down your way, to be honest. I can't quite remember. JB, he only went out a couple of JB Woodcroft, that was one. And it was something I never knew about. I mean, I just thought it was something that did exist many moons ago, but I didn't realise it was a practice still being carried out in this day and age, if you like. So do you have people other, what I'd call sort of more the not as popular type trades coming to you for certain items, because they like all the green felt stuff that's just not a lot of use to join us, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. I hope I'm not going to upset too many wood turners, but I find them the most difficult group of the wood industry, because they will come up and they will pick apart absolutely everything, and they'll spend fucking hours, but then they'll go to the firewood pile and they'll pick up the crappiest bit of wood that you've neglected for the last 5 years. And then
that's interesting.
So in that sense, we do have. It's weird because the farm it is bandit territory. Like there's very few people around there, but the farm, considering, has a pretty high footfall. I've been fairly kind of proactive trying to get people up to there to have a look. I mean, at the moment I'm trying to attempt what's that fancy word? It's ornithological groups, which is basically people that like birds. because there's an amazing amount of bird life up there. I mean, I'm trying my best to get a lot of these really niche groups who are interested in UK wildlife to really, have a stab at Grantland.
Oh, so you've actually sort of tried to diversify, not just from the timber side in the sense of the wood milling side, and obviously because I know you're on the farm, you say because you got all your cows, but you're trying to diversify slightly and do more of a wider range, sort of like to draw people in for what is. I mean, the English countryside, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Don't get me wrong, but
absolutely.
So you're trying to draw people in for other aspects away from the actual timber business, so to speak, as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing place which has the ability to teach people about the British countryside, and it gives them an understanding of actually the fine balance in which people need to invest and involve themselves to make sure that wildlife stays as it is. And
how big are your woodlands?
The woodlands is 67 acres, and the grassland is 100 acres.
It's quite a decent size, wow. Isn't it?
You take a while to walk around it then.
Well, when we do the squirrel shooting, the route probably takes me about, I don't know, an hour if I'm rushing.
That's quite a few miles.
Definitely.
It's a good 4 miles-ish, then, isn't it? That sort of as a walk then at that pace, 4 to 5 miles on easy.
Yeah, it's some beautiful walks. I mean, there's a lot of. It's weird, isn't it? Because I work there, I sometimes forget just how
you don't see what's
beautiful it is, and yeah, I'm completely blinkered because all I seem to be focused on is trying to do work stuff. And then I've started to make a conscious effort now to every morning when I go and walk the dogs, just to go somewhere random that I haven't been in a while, and it's nice. Like it's that little kind of morning kind of breather, and I'm just getting to admire
it's nice.
it.
You like going for one, don't you, Josh? Down to the front from yours, don't you, in the morning sometimes and what have you?
Yeah, lovely. What about your sawmills? That I think you said so. And you said you got 2, right?
Yeah. One is a American company called Wood Miser. It was specifically kind of developed for people who are going off in homesteads and that kind of thing, and they wanted to erect a structure of some description. So it gave people a fast and productive way of being able to use and utilize stuff on
so you mean
within their surroundings,
like a mobile,
which is really good.
Almost.
Yeah, it is. Imagine a pretty long trailer, hydraulic bed, horizontal bandsaw, and the mast goes up and down. And obviously, you've got either little levers on the side.
So it's literally a big piece of machinery on the back of a lorry bed, effectively. That one.
On a trailer. Yeah.
So I've seen a few that Nick James Designs uses where it's like almost like, I don't know, it looks almost like a big sawhorse, but with a chainsaw where you lower it down and you cut, and that very, very, it looks like just a big chop saw, really, that one. But this one you're talking about is more of so it's definitely more industrial almost, because obviously if it's on a trailer itself, in definition.
It's got, I mean, for its size, it's got a pretty high productivity output. Yeah, it's quite good. Cool. But so the guy that you're talking about, Nick James, he's got something called a Logosol, and that is it's a chainsaw mill. So it's the productivity comparative to the Wood Miser. It's unquestionable.
It is most definitely. So the Wood Miser, because obviously it's not something we know about at all in the slightest. Because I mean, I go down to my local hardwood place and I'll have that and I walk off with a slice of whatever it is I'm buying or a board.
It's like that.
It is. I'll just phone up and say I want X amount of European boards or walnut or whatever, and I just go down and pick them up. Or I can pick up slabs or cookies or whatever. So like obviously the woman, it's more for like just like you say for like a one tree thing, like you're doing the one tree for a little thing. Whereas yours, would you get a big like massive proper tree and you'd mill it the whole thing in the go?
Yeah. So it has its limitations. It has a throat of about 2 foot in diameter.
So throat, is that like the circumference or the diameter of the tree?
Yeah, the diameter
so
of the
tree. So that's the biggest tree that could.
Yeah, in which it can
sit
handle.
on the machine almost. Right.
Correct. Yeah. So it can handle 2 foot in diameter, and at a push, it could do 21, 22 foot long.
22. That's a long board. That is a long board.
That's a big tree. That's a good sized tree. Yeah. But the other mill, this is the more interesting of. Well, I would say more interesting of the two because it's mine. But I actually got a sawmill which is from Australia called a Lucas mill.
Oh yeah.
And the Lucas mill has a cutting capacity of 6 foot 2 inches in diameter, and it's highly portable. Like I mean, it's so portable that it gets sold to various rainforests wherever. I don't know whether or not they're using it for illegal logging purposes or whatever. Anyway, it's so portable that it deconstructs into kind of singular components, and then what you do is you can erect it around the stick that you want to convert. And
but you mean you put it around the tree while the tree's in the ground? Sorry.
No, it's felled. So it's horizontal.
Sorry. Right, sorry, I just misunderstood. We see you sort of process around. So you're still putting the timber trunk effectively onto the. So do you have?
No. So this thing is sat on the deck. So imagine the tree sat on the deck, and then you've got four uprights that go into the corners, and then two rail systems on the side, and the engine unit
I see.
sits
So you actually
on top.
you almost build it around the tree when it's on the floor. So the tree's felled. Yeah. It's on the floor. It's on the forest floor, and then you build that machine around that trunk, and then process it. So would you have to go? Do you have to go along with the chainsaws when you're felling a tree, or you do whatever you're doing on your lands? So obviously you fell your tree. Are you doing that sort of like obviously with different chainsaws? I'm presuming, and then do you take all the branches off? So you're just left with the tree, and then do you cut it into like 10-foot sections or 20-foot sections to transport it to your mill to then process into slabs?
Yeah, correct. So for the wood miser primarily, that is from a felling site. So we would apply for a felling license, and then we would then select. I'd go along, or Nick would go along, and then we'd select a few of the trees that we'd want to take down. These would typically be, I don't know, larch or something as an example, and then that would be snedded up. Snedded up means taking it from the trunk. I don't know if that's visible or something like that, and then all the lateral limbs taken off. So it's a nice, clean, straight pole, and then we would then cut it to the required lengths for the timber lorry, because obviously if the timber lorry has a trailer on the back, that's, I don't know, as an example.
If it's a 10-foot trailer, you need 10-foot sections, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
With
the lorries that you see on the and they'll exactly So they'll pick up those saw logs, and then they'll load it onto their wagon, and then they'll take it to the yard, the sawmill field, and then we'll just pick it up and load it onto the sawmill when we need it.
Trying time.
What's the sawmill set you back?
So Nick bought his wood miser. I can't remember. This is second. I think he bought his wood miser in early 1990, and it was about 32,000.
So it's quite a substantially
something like
expensive piece of kit, then, isn't it? Wow. So when you fell the tree, you then take it back to where. So are you having to dry it out before you process it in your mill? So you cut it and then you dry it.
So we fell trees. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the other way you can also aid with that situation is there seems to be an obsession with being able just to eliminate the trees whenever you like. But if you're thinking about it, fell the trees in a dormant period, which is autumn or winter, because there is less sap. That means there is less moisture in that timber. Therefore, when you're loading it, it's not heavy. It's not as heavy. You're not going to have that many complications. And then when you're obviously, it will take a bit of time for us, of course, to process it. We're not completely industrial with our sawmills. We'll use it as and when a job comes through. So then the timber might be sat around for a little bit longer. So it's got an additional it might have a couple of years, few years in the round, drying off a bit, and then we will process it, and then I might be a bit energized enough to stack and sticker it.
So
occasionally, I don't.
Does it not cause problems? Because I mean, obviously you got wood movement, splits, all sorts of things, which goes a part and parcel with wood full stop. And it's one thing that, even though I should know being a joiner, but one thing I don't understand very well is wood movement and stuff like that, and how things, I just don't understand it very well. So, obviously, once you process it, then if it's not dry, say, because obviously you can work with timber in a furniture aspect once it gets down to a correct moisture level and what have you, obviously, and obviously you've got to check your moisture levels with however you with a little meter. So if you processed it and then you're leaving it then to dry, is that when it will start splitting potentially if it was a fault with the tree? I know it doesn't. So that's what it. So it's the drying process that causes a lot of the defaults. Is it almost?
Well, no, not just that. No, not just that. The defects are also when if I put a wriggly bit of timber on the sawmill, the areas of tension and compression are going to be obvious. So if I've got a U-shaped, I'll try and use it on a post-it. So if the stick isn't straight in uniform, of course my pen doesn't work when I need it to.
We always check before we start. We've got pens and stuff that work. We learned that. Yeah.
If the stick isn't straight in uniform, that means, and it's all over the place like a bit of a fucking wiggle. It means when I put it on that mill, it's going to come off banana shaped.
Yeah,
so that's why there's a level of importance to producing straight timber.
Because obviously, like when we cut stuff down after, so like when we get a 4x4, we put it into a 4x2. I think because I told you, Josh, this when you were doing your table legs, that what you're meant to do is if we have to resaw it, you resaw it. You leave it overnight or a day or two before you then use it, because it can still, as you cut the wood, it changes the tension within the wood itself as well, doesn't it? Potentially.
Yeah. There are other factors, but there's a guy that I chat to quite regularly. Anyway,
any people's names that gets mentioned, but we do leave all descriptions and comments to people's other pages, because it's all about sharing people's knowledge.
Cool.
Like, we don't know about what it is, so if you want to say, oh, so and so's really good, we recommend him, we put links in so people can then research the item as much as they want to themselves outside the program.
Well, there's a chap called goes under the name of Woodlouse Industries on Instagram. He did a fantastic post about stress tension in a piece of timber that he was milling, and he took a nice photo of the stick that he was milling along the linear grain, and it was only part way cut, but there was a gap of a good
as he was
5-6
cutting
inches.
It started to kick up eventually from the bit that was already cut.
It started to
because that's why sometimes when you're cutting stuff, you have to put a wedge in it, because it's going the opposite direction. It's trying to close, and that's why we have riving knives, isn't it? Effectively, it's just split the wood apart when it's cut.
Correct. But there's also another. So I'm going to just do a load of circles. So if you imagine, obviously, the log.
Yeah, so you've got like the bullseye
this.
effect.
Correct, and I'm cutting the boards.
Yeah, so you're taking the slices directly through. So you've got either. So on some sides you got like the upside down U, on the other side you have the like a U. Yeah.
Correct. During the drying process, that is an indicator to how this thing will move. So that center point is called the pith, and because of all the grain being short grained here, that center point typically splits down the center, boom, like that. And everything across the top where the grain action is slightly longer, like that, that's when it will bow downwards. And consequently on the opposite side,
that is literally to do with how the tree was under tension as it was grown, that causes the bowing and the cupping depending on what side of the log effectively that piece was from.
Yeah, but of course, if we take oak as an example, there is some beautiful bits of grain that you'll only get from the center, which is it's called the quarter sawing effect, which is best way to describe it is cutting it in a certain way which allows the medullary rays to be viewable. and the medullary razor are the way that the tree receives nutrients in the peripheries. But that is only visible on cutting it using a quarter sawing action, and that is the shortest grain possible action on that.
Yeah, because I've sort of
does that make sense?
Because you have that quarter, then you got the crown, and all the different types of cuts. Which, I mean, they do it an awful lot, or they sell it. I'd say when you get like the veneers, like the different veneers that you get on these sheets of MDF, which I know it's not probably a great example, but there's like 4 or 5 different cuts, which are basically styles of cut, which shows you the different grain and the. I always forget what they're called. You know, the pointy bits of the grain. But no, so when you've got the
what do you mean? Pointy bits.
Anywhere. Hold on, what's an oak here? So when you've got your grain, there you go. So you can see with your grain, I'm trying to get it. So you've got the grain, and it comes up in these sort of very fine points here. So they have all these. So what's that called? That sort of pattern where it's you've got a name, haven't they? Because you cathedrals.
I think it's called cathedral something like that.
Yeah, no, it's cathedral. Yeah, I think it's more of an American phrase, but it's cathedral because that makes a difference to which way they're pointing and stuff, doesn't it? Was it to do with strengths and stuff and taps? But so that's where it comes from. To when they say that quarter sawn and the crown, that's the different part of the log. Apparently, is it? Because then the grain will look differently, doesn't it?
Yeah. So of course you can quarter saw on any of this, on any part of the tree, but there's a lot of manipulating that you would have to do to do that. And of course there'll be points of the board which you will only get, I don't know, something that is a couple of inches. So for me, I could just quarter saw everything, but it's so much faff. It's much easier just going through and through and just continuing on, and then just creating slabs and then removing the quarter sawing ones.
So obviously slabs are generally used for
whoever wants
the boards, aren't they? Effectively a slab, because then you can process them down to whatever size you want or thickness, dimensions, and they become basically slabs. I know some people use them for resin tabletops or whatever when you're book matching and all the other faff. So, but then you've got the cookies, haven't we? That go, which are effectively a slice of the tree as you go up. So what's the benefit? Yeah. I know they're quite popular with certain like table people, because obviously they're table shaped to start with, and it require a lot of work to go into a table. So what's the benefit then with a cookie?
Yeah. What's a cookie?
It's a cross-cut bit. So imagine the stick is like that. They've effectively, instead of cutting it along that action, along there, they've just cross-cut it into discs.
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
I mean they split to buggery.
Is that because
they just split
like the bullseye thing,
but
which makes it a lot weaker? I mean, I don't know.
Exactly, the action on the grain is so it's short, isn't it? So the area in which it has to move isn't along the grain. It'll make it a lot. It's in effect it'd be a lot out.
It'd be a lot weaker. A cookie then is a lot weaker because of the grain direction, because it can't. If it tries to move, obviously wood does move with seasonal and it can only move across the width anyway, can't it? Well, it can move on the length, but the length is only going to be point. Even on a board, the length on a board is like 0.01 millimeter per 10 foot. Or so. It's minute, isn't it, on the length, but on the width. So is that
on the width? Correct. Which is why, as joiners, when you make your tables, you cut them into staves, don't you? When you cut the staves, you flip every other one. So when that movement happens across, I don't know, 5 inches,
you don't see it. Butcher block workshops, that sort of thing, isn't it? Because you're only moving. So generally, staves are about 40 mil, aren't they? As a general rule on a worktop. So on a kitchen worktop,
I don't know. I'm not sure.
There'll be 40 mil staves, because then, as you say, they're only moving.
Okay.
They're only going to move. Not even quarter of a millimeter. You know what I mean? They're going to move 0.1 of a mil, if that, over a foot. Whereas if you did it as the other way, as end grain, because effectively it's end grain, isn't it, to a point?
Yeah.
If you don't flip them, you end up with a cup table eventually.
Exactly.
If you don't flip the staves.
Yeah.
I bet that's happened to a fair few people.
Yeah, I mean, this is why the big slabs, yeah, they look wonderful, and you'd assume that it would be less work, but actually, I think they're a lot of fucking work because we're talking. I've got boards that are over 5 foot wide and a
It's
2 mil of movement over 5 foot.
Yeah.
It's no, but it's so obvious, isn't it? It's 5 foot wide, and this thing has just gone whoop. And then
Yeah,
when you go to sell it, you get a very disgruntled customer because I can't sit there and I go, I can't reproduce this. I'm sorry, I can only give you an alternative.
Yeah, that's the problem.
It's
So obviously, if you then try to flatten that, because you've only got so little to even work with, you'd end up with not even that. Well, you end up with minute
1-inch board.
Have this piece of paper.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because obviously then you've got all the different, because all different woods have different grain tightnesses almost, if you know what you call it, with the grain being so much tight, which obviously then the closer the grain is, the harder the wood is it not? Is that the closer the grain is within the piece, that's the harder the wood is?
The closer the grain. Well, not necessarily. That's indicative of its rate of growth. So if you're looking at the end grain and the rings are nice and tight and compact, that just shows that
so what makes the woods harder or softer? So obviously things like walnut is a lot harder than pine, clearly, obviously, and obviously within hardwoods. I mean, Purple Heart. My God, Purple Heart is so hard that just eats blades like there's no tomorrow. But so what makes Purple Heart then so much harder or tougher, or if you know what I mean, than oak, which is still a hardwood?
I don't know much. I don't know anything about the tropical hardwoods.
But what's the principle behind different woods? Obviously, all right. If you go to walnut and oak, walnut's a lot harder than oak. Why is that?
Yeah, you're probably right with it, but that sounds to me as if it's more of the grain density and the capillaries.
Right. So that's obviously then the bits in between the rings of the tree, effectively, is it? So the closer they are,
yeah, I would say so.
The denser the wood is it? Type thing.
Yeah, but looking at the concentric circles on the outside doesn't necessarily mean it's a softwood or a hardwood. That just shows that it has a different rate of growth. So you must have seen that famous photo where it's got, I don't know, a pitch pine piece of 4x4.
Yes, what I was mentioning earlier on, yeah. And yet you look at today's, it's only got like 6 rings in the whole bloody piece, hasn't it? Opposed to the billion. I mean, that you had that nice. What was that nice stuff you got from that reclaimed that you got for your table, Josh? That was nice. Was it Douglas fir or something you had? Was it you got all that reclaimed stuff, didn't you? Maybe? Off a job. Oregon, that was it. Yeah.
Oh, that was nice.
The rings on it were nice, and you could see it was just grown beautifully. Do you know what I mean? All right. So it's just so
nice.
There's so much with the different types of wood, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Every single piece of every single tree has different properties, and they're all part of a very well balanced system that you can easily tip the balance if you're being slightly casual. And that's why foresters, I think, this is why I actually prefer forestry over tree surgery now, is because there's so much more. I would say there's so much more depth to the forestry industry than there is doing
the way of thinking. Slightly, the perception's different.
What's the difference between forestry and tree surgery?
Well, amenity tree work, I mean, by definition, is to make something look nice and wonderful. Yeah. Whereas the forestry, but forestry is for the production, the value to add the to grow something for a commercial value.
Because it's the same. It's the same with, like, going back to the mountain bike thing, where you go to a point. You look at some of the fields when you're going out the back of Clandegg. I've not been up there for a while actually, and you just see acres and acres of trees being felled, and you're like, no, what have you done to the area? You've destroyed it. Or that's the people's perception that they've destroyed it. No. That one area had a disease, and they had to fell it to stop it spreading into the rest of the forest. But the other area, it's like, no, we've had to do that because we need to do this to do that. to do that. And it was nothing to do with the mountain bike centre. It was to do with the growth and looking after the local area. Because what they'd done is they ended up planting something like 10,000 trees on the other side because it made that area a lot safer and better for the natural wildlife rather than the actual side. So is that more the forestry side of things? Not necessarily for profit, if you like, to a point.
That's an interesting kind of topic in itself, because there are, of course, sites in the UK and Europe which they are quite honestly just planting a load of trees
at some point in 10 years, cutting them all down, whatever it takes for that tree to grow.
When they've achieved a certain value, and then that's just a monoculture system. I don't really like that kind of thing. It's not really my bag. I understand it's the purposes of it, and you know, they're for the UK itself. We don't really have a kind of forestry or wood culture as such. Comparatively speaking to somewhere like a Scandinavian country, which has got, you know, land masses which are 52. Sorry, if you think about its total land mass, some of them are approaching about 50% of it being woodlands.
It is, yeah.
That's a lot. But if I think of the UK, it's under 14%. The entirety of the UK.
Really?
The woodlands in the UK only consist
That's
of
bizarre because there's so
14%.
many great big forests and areas around in the UK, isn't there? I mean,
well, there was obviously a lot more, but we had a couple of world wars and stuff, so and that's effectively the reason why the Forestry Commission was created. It was at one point they were scratching around thinking, shit, we've got to grow some sodding trees. Otherwise, if it comes to crunch time, we're pretty fucked again.
It's just these sort of things that you just don't think about as a joiner, I suppose, or whatever, carpenter, whatever they call it, woodworker, DIY, or whatever. Because you know, as I say, if I need a bit of oak for building something, I'll go and buy a bit of oak. I don't really think about where that tree's come from because it's not something that's ever sort of like really crossed my mind, to be honest. But it's a really interesting, you know, thing that, you know, I suppose we do actually need to think about, as you say, maybe be more responsibility in what you're doing in the sustainability of the country, woodlands and what have you. And I think it's
sure.
You know, it's
I mean,
obviously a lot of work.
We've
and very involved, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, if we've just left the EU, and obviously with leaving the EU, there is no longer that trade agreement, which is entirely free. So there has to be some particular steps now to be made for commodities, you know, for stuff like wood, because otherwise, how the hell are we going to build our houses? How the hell are we going to, you know, do all of the other necessary things that people need to do? So, as a producer, these, you know, political topics are sometimes I get a bit of flack from my friends, but because my mind can sometimes be against the grain to what is normal for them. But
okay, I think that's a good place to sort of wrap up for today, everybody. Have you got any final thoughts or things to say, Josh?
No, I just got another little fact here. The Australian has 125 million hectares, which is 16% of Australia's area.
So it's only,
so not much.
So that's about the same as the UK, give or take, into
woodland
percentage.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, which is nothing really compared.
Okay.
Compared to the land mass.
Again, I'd like to thank you, Jerry, very much for coming on today with us. No, it's been welcome. It's been an interesting chat. Learned a few things.
Having me, gentlemen.
We will be leaving all our links and Jerry's links and everything that's been talked about in the descriptions again. If you have any comments, questions for any of us, please leave them down below. And we will get back to them at some point in due course. Okay? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Before the sawmills and the forestry, Grantland Farm has been a working farm for over 1,000 years. Cattle is an intrinsic part of our well as mandatory cow cuddling time, of course, which we could waste hours of our day doing. The focus, however, isn't just the cattle. The focus is the grounds in which they graze, and without them, the way that Grantland thrives would not be possible. As Nick would say, the ground is sacred, which I'm now just starting to understand. Cattle play a vital role in the modern ecosystem and carbon sink. Part of Devon's charm is rolling lush, verdant hills which wouldn't be there if we didn't have Devon's famous cows. Every year our main herd has roughly 15 to 25 calves, and our role is to aid the heifer during difficult births and making sure the babies are nurtured, fed and free of ailments. This is just part of the parcel here, and I wouldn't change it for the world.